Are we good to begin, ma'am?
We are. Yes, of course.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. Happy day and a very good afternoon to one and all present here. We have gathered here for the webinar on counseling to promote mental health among people with gender identity issues. Let us begin the event with the invocation song. I now request Traiksha from 2nd BSc Psychology to render the invocation song. Over to you, Traiksha.
Om Pranavarupanayaka Umavalentaalaya Vinayaka Devamovar Potrume Ganayaka Devadi Devane Vinayaka Valvinagal Nikume Vinayaka Vendamaram Tannedum Vinayaka Monatin Murpurule Nayaka Mukkannan Maindane Vinayaka Omenum Pranavarum Vinayaka Umayavalentalaniya Vinayaka. Thank you.
Thank you, Traiksha. I now invite Ms. Gayatri Shweta Kumari, Head of Department Psychology, M.O.P. Vaishnav College for Women, to render the welcome address. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you. Happy day all. It is an immense pleasure to welcome all participants for the webinar, Counseling to Promote Mental Health Among People with Gender Identity Issues. With warm heart and salutations, I welcome speaker of the day, Ms. Rohini Keshavan Rajiv. Thank you for being here, ma'am, who is senior psychotherapist, clinical social worker, and post-compliance consultant. Ma'am is also founder director of Distress Holistic Health Private Limited, Bangalore, India. Gender dysphoria involves the conflict between person's physical or assigned gender and the gender with which he or she expresses identity. People with gender dysphoria may be very uncomfortable with gender they are assigned and sometimes described as being uncomfortable with their body or being uncomfortable with the expected roles of the assigned gender. And the gender conflict affects people in different ways. It can change the way a person wants to express their gender and can influence behavior, dress, and self-image. Some people may cross-dress, some may want to socially transit, while others may want to medically transit with sex change surgery or hormone treatment. Research findings say children who meet criteria for gender dysphoria may or may not continue to experience it into adolescence and adulthood. Some research shows that children who had more intense symptoms and distress, who were more persistent and consistent in their cross-gender statements and behaviors, may experience gender, and it is important to intervene and promote mental health. I'm truly delighted to introduce Ms. Rohini, who is the most appropriate senior therapist to share knowledge on the same. Ms. Rohini is psychotherapist with 18 years of clinical and corporate counseling experience. Ma'am is relationship counseling expert who specializes in counseling therapy, combating and overcoming sexual abuse, building resilience, understanding and overcoming depression, and a lot more. Her areas of expertise also include psychotherapy with different levels of distress across age groups, deals with persons struggling with acute psychosis and neurosis, corporate counseling, prevention of sexual harassment at school and work. Ms. Rohini is also recognized as subject matter expert in supporting mental health initiatives and practices in organizations, and scientific perspectives papers are well published in peer-reviewed journals, mainly stage publications. Currently, Ma'am joins the role of founder director of Israel's Center at Bangalore. She is also currently pursuing her doctoral research in social sciences from TIS, Mumbai. Ma'am holds master's degree in medical and psychiatric social work from Trichy. She is NIMHANS and Rotary certified and awarded telephonic suicide prevention helpline volunteership. Thank you so much for spontaneously accepting our invite and joining us for spreading your wide knowledge, ma'am.
My pleasure, Ms. Gayatri. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, you may now begin the session. It's over to you,
Oh.
ma'am. And I will request the participants to avoid using the chat box for any salutations or any unwarranted messages. Kindly only put in your questions and your queries. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Ripti. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope I'm audible to everyone. I thank you for being present for this online session on this bright and sunny afternoon. I know everybody is engaged with several things, so I really appreciate all of you taking the time to be here. Um, M.O.P. Vaishnav, I think it's amazing that they have chosen to um, this particular topic that needs to be addressed. I think it's progressive and it's wonderful that we are opening ourselves out to equality, equal rights, and understanding that there are aspects that we do not understand, that we do not comprehend in our everyday lives, but that doesn't mean it's not there. So it's my pleasure to be able to address this topic. However vast this topic is, I will be addressing a small portion of it, addressed to the students specifically, with an academic focus in mind, and for the final year students and of psychology and practitioners, giving them slight pointers as to how they should go ahead when they enter this field of counseling and psychotherapy, and especially in this particular topic. Okay, so today we're going to talk about how to promote mental health among people from different gender identities as they identify themselves. The notion that there are two and only two genders is one of the most basic ideas in our binary Western way of thinking. Transgender people challenge our very understanding of the world, and we make them pay the cost of our confusion by their suffering. This is a very thought provoking statement made by a very prominent researcher called Barbara Finlay. It was cited in 2003 in the Ontario Human Rights Journal. And I thought it's apt to start our session with this particular statement. Before we go into what are the aspects in counseling and supportive mental health, we need to understand what is gender identity, what is gender expression, what are the various terms that you need to be familiar with before you enter uh, into counseling and that specific topic of better understanding and better therapeutic help. So, first thing that you need to do is to understand and empathize and familiarize yourself, equip yourselves with the right knowledge. That's absolutely critical. Okay, so being trans affirmative or supportive to transgenders is great, but being trans informed is much better. You should not operate on half baked knowledge. You should know what you're going to be dealing with. So that's the most important thing when you're venturing into counseling in this field. So, for you to understand the various terms of gender identity, let's start with sex, which is the anatomical classification assigned at birth. You are either male, female, or intersex, where the um, reproductive organs are not specifically defined. So, that's although very small percentage of the population are assigned this at birth in India, this is very much there. Gender identity is a person's individual experience of gender, clearly identified or along the spectrum, and can be different from birth assigned sex or birth assigned gender. Gender expression is how a person chooses to present themselves in public, the name they choose to use, how they behave, appearance, voice, body language. And based on these attributes, how others also perceive or what they perceive this person's gender to be. Okay. Transgender is a person whose gender identity and expression is different from the stereotypical gender norms, which includes but is not limited to people who identify as transgender, trans woman who is male to female, trans man who's female to male, transsexual, cross-dressers, gender non-conforming or gender variance population. They are those persons whose behavior or gender expression does not match stereotypical gender norms. Like you cannot, um, you know, put them in brackets, like you are specifically male or specifically masculine, specifically feminine. So they are gender non-conforming population. And then you have the gender queer, which can be explained in two ways. One is this gender queer population are non-binary gender identity that they derive, and or they exist without aligning to any of the homosexual or heterosexual norms. So these are the terms that you need to be associated and familiarize yourself with before you enter into the field. Secondly, I think it's important that you understand what is discrimination. I mean, it's the word is quite obvious. Discrimination is some sort of um, unfair practice where we use our biases, where our prejudice, our ignorance comes forward, where we judge people based on their physical appearance. We see them as inferior, we are confused, we don't know how to deal with them. And this in turn leads to um, the specific population we're dealing with, which is people with gender identity, whose gender identity is different from ours. It leads to their isolation, vulnerability, and disadvantage. The second type of discrimination, of course, the most commonly seen is stereotyping, where we make assumptions based on the characteristics of a group of people. We generalize, we look at their external appearances, we go by the common social norms that we're familiar with, and we don't see them for who they actually are. And what this leads to is unquestioned stereotyping that continues. So we associate terms like abnormal, criminal, swindlers, frauds, pedophiles, extremely negative, um, terrible terms, abusive, mentally ill. These are the words that we used in general to describe people who we are not used to or we don't know too much about, because that's what we've seen, that's how social media depicts them. That's what we've heard from ill-informed family, friends, including law enforcement agencies, and more than from a judgmental standpoint. I think it comes from pure ignorance. We really don't know, and when we don't know, we deal with it quite badly, which is why knowledge is power, learning is power, and helps us familiarize with those things that we are unfamiliar with, and that's very critical. So the third type of discrimination is called transphobia, which is aversion. People are afraid, there's fear, there's hatred based on, again, gender, stereotypical gender norms. This leads to ridicule, violence, and harassment of the LGBTQ population. The fourth is called cis normativity. So, for students who don't understand what cis means the more commonly known. Okay, same as. Literally, it means same as. So, cis normativity means common assumptions that all people are cisgender. That means we are either male or female, we're not transgender, and that their gender identity and expression is the same as their birth gender. So it's an assumption that we work on. What we do is we believe that there is only one right, normal, and moral expression of gender. So we form our biases based on this assumption. Okay. What this leads to is it impacts normal living, healthcare support, especially. These are very important aspects, okay? Because when we are not prepared for this kind of reality, we don't know how to deal with it, which in turn terribly affects, the LGBTQ population when they're looking to lead a normal life, to um, benefit from the normal everyday support system that most of us are privileged to have. It's a privilege. So after you understand what discrimination means, it's also important for you as students of psychology to understand what are the common forms of discrimination that comes in the way of normal living. First would be, of course, direct, indirect, and subtle discrimination that literally um, damages the mental health of the population we are talking about, because we exclude them. We exclude them from housing, from employment, indirect employment as well. Sometimes, when you work in a company and we have a contract with another company, and if that company has employed transgender population to work for them, and suppose this company does not know that, and when the workers who are in contract come over to your company, there are companies that cancel these contracts because they feel that this is not something they're equipped to handle. And while they may not directly speak to transgender employees or ostracize them by canceling the contract that their firm has with this, shared services company, you are indirectly discriminating against them. Okay. The other aspects of course, subtle or even direct discrimination is remarks. People being absolutely rude, unkind, and singling them out for negative treatment. So the second form of discrimination is by association. How many of us see this commonly, especially in this era of um, social media? And uh, we can type, we can say things. Um, Not everyone knows who's saying those things. Anybody can have a fake account or a fake name and be downright um, degrade, another human being. We ostracize family, we ostracize friends, we ostracize people who empathize or advocate, uh, the transgender community. So that is discrimination by association. Gender-based harassment and sexual harassment is also extremely pertinent in the LGBTQ community. And this is done with an intent to hurt, to cause fear, and to humiliate the population. So it's important to understand what sort of gender-based harassment are we talking about, which is very typical of harassment of the female gender, when women get harassed because of the way they talk, the way they dress, the way they appear, the company they keep. So similarly, the similar kind of gender-based harassment is met out to the LGBTQ population, where they are not given the freedom to express themselves. They're not given the freedom to honestly live a free, normal life like the rest of the population. Sexual harassment, of course, uh, making inappropriate comments, trying to touch them inappropriately, staring at them, leching at them, thinking it's all right to talk about their private parts, thinking it's all right to share pornographic material, um, all of it, which comes under, the whole gamut of sexual harassment, is another common form of discrimination that people from LGBTQ community face as well. Hostile environment, also very typical of sexual harassment. One of the clauses where the environment, the work environment, or any sort of public environment, where people treat them with hostility, with anger, with um, a lot of resentment and dislike, or not allowing them um, to use washrooms that are appropriate to their expressed and identified gender, asking trans women to use men's washrooms, ridiculing them, laughing at them, disrespecting them at work, travel, thinking that if someone is an expressed transgender person, then somehow that's like a license for other people to harass them physically or emotionally. We somehow seem to remove the human aspect from that association, and I think that's something to really think about. What happens to us? Why do we force them to withdraw and leave feeling so humiliated? Is that really an okay thing to do? So these are common forms of discrimination that they face. To become trans affirmative psychologists or trans informed psychologists in trans affirmative psychological practice, what are the aspects that you need to remember? So I will not be going in depth to all the aspects, but I will be talking to you about a few important things that you need to remember. So providing transgender and gender non-conforming people with culturally competent and developmentally appropriate professional psychological help is critical. That means you have to do your homework. Okay, be aware of first of all, you understand how psychology works, how mental health help works, and also um, learn specific aspects of working with the LGBTQ population. So developmental psychology is critical for you to know. Evaluate if you can understand the social, legal, regional, religious aspects. There are so many aspects, so many points that you need to understand when you try to help the LGBTQ population. You need to understand all the aspects in the context of the LGBTQ population. Okay, so you need to understand how you understand oppression yourself. What is oppression? Oppression is not allowing someone to live a free life, isn't it? You keep them guarded, you stop them, it's almost like imprisoning someone. You oppress them. And as a therapist, as a psychologist, you need to question yourself if you're coming from a position of privilege. What happens if caste oppression mixes with gender oppression and expression of identity? So think about that. Think about not just a person who chooses to, chooses a different gender identity from what he or she is born with. On top of it, we are dealing with their caste and religion and regional issues. We talk about Brahmins, or we talk about Dalits, or when you mix those issues along with gender identity, expressions, the kind of problems that that individual faces is unfathomable. It's like a combination of very negative approach to things, and it becomes extremely difficult. So as a therapist, you need to understand, um, are you coming from a position of privilege where you feel that no, you know what, I mean, it's the same for everybody. It's not the same for everybody. I always say this in my practice, whether it's to do with different communities, whether it's to do with um, COVID, whether it's to do with the, mental health help, whether it's to do with women working, um, whatever it is, every aspect. While we are in the same storm, we are all in the same, you know, um, terrible place. We are all on different boats. We do not handle things the same. We do not have the same kind of facilities. We do not have the same kind of support system. So it's important to empathize with those who don't have what you have, and never say that, okay, I understand where you come from, if you really cannot understand where they come from, where any person comes from, not just the LGBTQ population. So you really need to reevaluate your position of privilege to better your empathetic skills. So evaluate your personal bias, your conditioning, what have you been taught when you're growing up, and question your knowledge and your underlying judgment, if any, that you are probably unaware of. So it's important for you as young psychologists, as students of psychology, to probably do the Johari window for yourselves. If you've not heard of the Johari window, it's a 4-columned. How do I put this? So basically, you divide the things that you know about yourself, things that you know and other people don't know, things that other people know and you don't know, and things that you don't know and other people don't know about you. So look it up, and evaluate your personality, how you come across, what are your characteristics, by putting in a small Johari window table for yourself. And you'll be amazed at the things that probably your friends and family notice about you, which you are not aware of, which is your blind spot. You think it's not like this, but that's not how you come across to another person. So it will help. Reflexivity is very important as a therapist, and it needs to be done continuously. It's not like you reflex, reflect on, not reflex, reflect on who you are as a person and as a therapist when you start your career, and then you feel that 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line, you're still the same. That's not true. So it's almost going to be 2 decades since I've started my practice in the field of psychology. And I think I've learned and grown as a person. um, I think about things differently now. I'm able to um, understand, empathize differently, uh, because that's what age and experience does to you. And you learn from your experience. And it's important that you keep reevaluating who you are as a person. Question your beliefs, question your knowledge. You never know enough. You're never too old to learn, and you're never too young to be an example. It's very important for you to remember that. Some guidelines that I believe mental health practitioners and students can follow. I have um referred a very holistic, very beautifully framed policy from the Ontario Human Rights Commission. That's where I've got a couple of the guidelines from. So first thing that you need to do as a therapist, of course, irrespective of the population that you work with, is to understand, accept, support, and empathize. Okay, so these are 4 pillars of psychology, 4 pillars of counseling that you need to, really remember this time and time again. Please understand that gender is a non-binary construct. Non-binary, as in binary, of course, means two, right? So male, female. So it's important for us to understand that gender cannot be, constructed, with that sort of a vision. It is a non-binary construct that allows a range of identities that may or may not align with the person's birth gender. Okay. Secondly, gender identity and sexual orientation are fluid concepts. All right. However, they are clinically and theoretically very, very distinct from one another. They are also, juxtaposed. They're also interconnected, because you can't keep one away from the other, but you also cannot say that it's the same. So it's important for you as a therapist to understand this distinction, understand the gender identity comes first, it forms first, and sexual orientation happens towards a later stage of life. So please do not impose a specific gender identity to anybody without their consent. Okay. Allow expression of repressed conflict and confusion, if any, when you are in a therapeutic setup, in a therapeutic relationship with somebody who comes to you with, like what Ms. Gayatri was talking about, gender related issues where, we deal with teenagers, young children, where when they come to us with gender dysphoria, as it's called, what do you do? What are the first things you do? You allow them to express, reflect about what's going on with them and address their repressed conflict. Repression, as you understand, is conflict that is they have not been able to come to terms with. They have let it fester, grow inside them, yeah, and they keep it within themselves. So when there is repressed conflict, there is disappointment in some aspects, confusion in some aspects of their life, that comes out in other areas. It gets projected and displaced onto other areas. Okay, you project yourself differently, and then you displace your anger on other people or other things. So that's what repressed conflict does to most of us. So it's important for you to allow the expression, try to clear any confusion if they have about their gender identity construction and how they look at themselves. help them explore and understand different narratives, and affirm their gender identities according to what they think and feel is comfortable, not according to what you think is comfortable or right. That's not our job, that's not our role as a therapist. We are not here to judge anyone. We are not here to tell them how they need to live their life. We are not here to advise, or we're purely here as facilitators to provide them with catharsis, provide them with the right direction, because we are more informed, and rightfully so. We should be more informed than our clients are. The onus of being more informed lies with us as therapists, not with our clients, irrespective of the population that comes to see us. Okay. This slide is specifically talking about young children, teenagers who come to you for help. Um, I've, tried to bring in an analogy of a caterpillar to a butterfly, where the whole transition becomes very difficult for them. They do not understand what's going on with them. They have confusing feelings, don't know how to handle it. So counseling a teenager requires you to understand lifespan development, help, accept, support, guide them, to the right resources, teach them about rights that they will have and they already have, and allow them to explore this area. How do you do that? You do that by addressing the discomfort, if they have any discomfort that they have about their body parts. Let them talk about it. Don't cringe when you hear these things, and let the physical development unfold. Let it be, let it happen. Let them grow, let them understand the changes that they're experiencing in the body and the feelings that are associated with those changes, and how they what is the gender that they are connecting themselves with. So you cannot lead them to what you think is right. You need to allow them to explore and come up with their own narrative. Okay. But however, as a therapist, you need to look for signs of anxiety, depression, fear. Okay. Help them process those thoughts, help them understand what are the feelings that they're experiencing. Let them talk about it without uh, being afraid of judgment, or being afraid of being looked down at, or, looked at with pity. It's not required. They don't need that. All right. Understand the source of their stress. Is it coming from rejection from friends or family that came to know about the changes that they're experiencing or what they're talking about? Is it prejudice? Is it fear? Is it confusion? Try to help them, figure out their source of stress. Support them, teach them about gender identity, expression, use the right pronouns, he, she, uh, you know, her, his. It's very important to do that, and allow them to express, allow them to tell you how they need to be addressed, and acknowledge that gender identity that they are associating themselves with. And that is your role as a therapist, as a trans affirmative, trans informed therapist. Okay. Affirm and accept the child's expressed gender identity. Help them develop coping strategies, teach them emotional tools to integrate into a positive gender identity if they are questioning what it is. The gender questioning is quite common among teenagers who go through this phase. See, it's also important for you to understand that not all children who go through the gender questioning phase, or feel that they're somewhere along the spectrum. There is no hard and fast rule that, okay, this is the specific gender that they'll identify themselves with when they grow up as well, or that they will continue to be the same, identify themselves with the same birth gender, or they won't. Okay, you will have to wait and see. So integrate into them a positive gender identity, irrespective of what it is that they choose to follow. That is your role as a therapist. Understand how gender intersects with other identities, like I was telling you a couple of slides before this, a couple of minutes ago. You need to know that it's not just a person with their gender identity we're talking about. We're talking about that person, where they come from, what sort of religious background they come from, what sort of economical background they come from. Is it easier in a state like in a country like India, or is it harder? Is it easier in a city like Bangalore, or is it harder? Is it easier in a place like Chennai compared to a place like Trichy? Is it easier in a town, tougher in a village? When they come out, when they want to talk about it, or when they want to live their life the way they choose, which, you have to look at all the intersects that, um, you know, form a part of their identity, form, the problems that they're dealing with. Uh, Also, it's not just cultural aspects we're talking about here. We're also talking about work. We're also talking about social interaction. We're talking about several aspects. For example, if a place like Bangalore, where I'm from, where or several cities in India, where the Pride movement, diversity movement has taken force, and people are becoming a lot more understanding that this is discrimination in any form is not okay. Maybe it's easier working in places like this. Maybe it's easier working in certain sectors that have openly spoken about being welcoming. However, working in a restaurant in the same city may be difficult, because there are people who come, people who laugh, people who judge, because that's the easiest thing that we do as human beings, isn't it? Criticize and laugh and comment on a person's appearance and the choices that a person makes. It's easy for us to be on the giving end of the spectrum. It's when you're on the receiving end that it becomes really hard for you to deal with. So as a therapist, it's very important for you to understand all these intersections, these subsets that play around, and not just look at gender identity in a singular way. Okay, understand how stigma, prejudice, discrimination, violence that they deal with, how all of this affects their health and well-being. How is it easy? How is it possible for someone to be happy if they feel they're going to be judged all the time, if they're going to be looked at all the time, if they cannot find a place to live, if they cannot find a job to work with? That's not okay. That's not equality in any form, is it? And remember that as a counselor, as a psychologist, as a therapist, the onus of being informed is on you. It's not on the client, like I was talking about in my previous slide as well. So reflect on your personal and your cultural biases, your attitudes, your belief systems, and try to figure out if all these things are interfering with your therapeutic alliance, in the way you interact with your clients. And is it coming through? Is your bias coming through? Are you saying things without your knowledge? You may mean well, but how are you coming across? So does your population feel judged? Does your population feel threatened? It's important, like I said, again, time and time again, I say the same thing. Reflect on who you are and where you come from and what path you are taking right now. Okay. A colleague who works specifically in the trans affirmative space mentioned to me yesterday when I was talking with him, Mr. Mahesh Natarajan from I've mentioned it in the resource list. What he said was, it's important not just to be trans affirmative and trans informed. It's important for you to call out if you're not trans affirmative and if you're not trans informed. If you don't do this, and if you don't know how to handle clients who are trans, genders, then you should mention that in your profile, mention that in your therapy practice, because that's the only fair, right thing to do. Because then clients can take an informed decision that, okay, you are not trans affirmative, you don't know how to handle the space, or you're not comfortable. It's okay. But you need to call that out. That's the only fair thing to do. And I thought when he mentioned that to me yesterday, I thought that was an excellent takeaway. It's not just what you are, it's also what you're not. Understand and appreciate how relationships differ in the LGBTQ community. So I work in this space as well, but I don't work in all the aspects. I work specifically in the relationship aspects of the LGBTQ couples who come to me. And that's the only thing I'm qualified to handle as well. um, it's important to understand and appreciate how it is different for them. Okay, it's not the same when a country or its policies do not allow marriage, do not allow staying together. The norms are not common in support of the LGBTQ community. So relationships are very different for them. When there's a legal complication, when there is a social complication, um, the whole aspect of how two people are together, whether you understand, polyamory and how these things affect a relationship in terms of in the aspects of people who identify themselves with a different gender. Uh, as a therapist, you should know, or you should at least most, uh, cisnorm people have. So understand the heightened degree of anxiety as experienced by them. When you talk about anxiety and depression, transgender population, the LGBTQ community, what sort of anxiety, what sort of fears are they dealing with? And the extreme levels of stress that they deal with is something that you need to familiarize yourself with, empathize with them when that happens. Be sensitive to all age groups, understand how much harder it is for older people to come out. Okay, maybe the younger population, with the different kinds of um, support that they are gathering from more informed, more understanding people is there. It is or the elder population to come out. You need to understand and be sensitive to these. Understand the years of living in secrecy and, hiding from your family, hiding from your friends because of fear of oppression, fear of falling prey, to the ill informed prejudices of society, unfortunately, because what we don't know, um, we react very badly to it. Okay. Be informed and competent. Learn from the right skills, from the right resources. As a therapist, I think that's absolutely, absolutely important. So, you can't just read a book on psychology and then go and practice, become a practitioner. Can you? You can't. You need to have a degree, you need to have um, practical knowledge along with theoretical knowledge. You need to know how to apply concepts. There are several aspects before you become a practitioner in any field, but especially in psychology. It's not just enough to have the knowledge, you need to have the skill, you need to have the training. So you need to be competent and you need to learn and understand from the right resources. So if you're looking to specialize in this field going forward, please look out for the right resources and learn correctly so that you can help appropriately, which is very important going forward. It's important for you to know that everyone we meet is fighting a battle that we know nothing about. So, important to be kind. Always be kind, no matter who you're dealing with in life. So, I would like to open out to questions now. If there are any questions that you probably Dipti can read out appropriate questions.
Yes, ma'am, we will do that. Thank you for your insightful talk, ma'am. We really gained so much knowledge and understanding about the entire situation. So now the floor is open for questions, and I would request the participants to enter the questions in the chat box, and I will request Deepti to facilitate the Q&A session. Over to you, Deepti.
Thank you.
I'll just share them on screen so you'll be able to answer them, ma'am.
Okay.
Ma'am, is it visible for you, ma'am?
No, Dipti.
Um,
Maybe, okay. Do you want me to stop sharing the presentation? Okay, here it is. How should we react when our own family members do not respect or even consider the presence of more than 3 genders and disrespect gender fluid people and non-binary people? Anshita, thank you for the question. It's exactly what I was talking about in the presentation, right? We are not equipped, we're not informed, we don't know. So when we don't know something, then respect or consideration is a very far-fetched expectation. So it's important to sit them and together and address it very patiently. Probably get someone who they trust, someone older, someone who can be patient with their questions and their judgments, and talk to them if that's important to you. You can't get angry, or you can't, you know, ostracize yourself from them, can you? It's not possible. It's your own family. And a little bit of empathy from your side also, to know that this is not commonly spoken about. We don't even speak about mental health. Then, speaking about various genders and being comfortable with that is not common. So please try to patiently talk to them, help them understand, address their questions. And if they are talking to you from a place of anger and a place of judgment, don't continue the conversation then. You tell them that when you're ready to speak to me or speak to my friend with respect, then I'm willing to talk to you about it. Otherwise, no, if you're an adult, then you should be able to treat each other with respect. That's the primary expectation in any relationship, isn't it? Getting a person they trust into your side of the game is probably going to be helpful as well. Don't expect complete understanding. It will come gradually, but probably not immediately.
So much, ma'am. Ma'am, there are a couple of more questions.
Okay.
Yes. Ma'am, is it visible for you, ma'am?
Not yet. I think it's taking a bit of time for it to come. Yes, I can see it now. Do you think inculcating these in school syllabus will help students who are questioning their identity? Absolutely. I absolutely think so. In fact, if I will show you, if you see the resources that I have mentioned, we have something called Sathya, which is a government kit. Okay, it's a booklet, it's a PDF document that is made by the Ministry of Welfare, Health and Welfare, Government of India, where they've actually included different gender identities. It's meant for teenagers. It's a support book to understand various aspects in life for youngsters in India, but it has also mentioned that. So I think it's a huge progress, small one, but nevertheless it's there, where the rights of various genders, and understand that it's it's not abnormal. So that sort of beginning has happened. In fact, just last week, I think somebody was talking about an ICSE syllabus textbook which had family defined, and there were 4 pictures of family where there was mother, father, child, uh, you know, father and children, mother and children, mother and child, father and child. So I think we are slowly inculcating those practices into the school stream as well. It's a great thought, but it's slow, but it started, which I think is wonderful.
Ma'am, there's another question here for you, ma'am.
Hmm. Go on.
Uh, so the question is, how do you deal with a client who wants to come out to their family and be out completely, even though they will put in physical danger if they do?
So this is again is quite common. In fact, if you see a couple, I don't remember the name of that person. Someone in Kerala whose family had actually locked her up, and unfortunately she passed away. It's a big fear. Okay, it's a scary thought that your family might endanger you if you come out with, you know, who you actually are. So you'll have to think this through, and always harness support. Make sure that people who are with you, your friends or family, whoever it is that who are on your side, you probably take them along, and speak to your family in such a way that you have sufficient a support system of your own in place in case things don't go well. But these are things that you have to do very sensitively. Okay, these are not, it's not we can't generalize based on one person or based on one question that is asked. It has to be very well thought out, and any sort of advice or guidance that you give should be based on several aspects of that situation. You can reach out to various organizations that work with the LGBT community, like Humsafar or Inner Sight. They, will have specialized people who will be able to guide you through this process. I think you should definitely give that a thought.
Thank you, ma'am. There's one more question here. As
Yeah.
in counselor, how we help these type of people like LGBT who come for counseling?
Mm. So that's what the presentation was about. No, if you go through the slides, what you need to do is practice your empathy, understanding, read, be informed. Like I said, it's not enough to be affirmative. It's not enough to say that I'm a supportive therapist. It's important to have the right kind of knowledge. And if you don't have that right kind of knowledge, then you probably need to let them know in advance that I'm not equipped to help you. If you feel that your prejudices are going to come out, then be kinder to them. Be kind to them and tell them that I'm sorry, I'm not equipped to handle this or handle issues. May I refer you to someone who can? So that's the honest and um, nice thing to do. If you feel that you can't handle it, then please don't. And if you want to handle it, learn and equip yourself and then handle it. It's not uncommon to feel this way, but it's also important that your biases and your judgments or your fears do not come out in a therapeutic transaction that you have. Okay, please remember that.
Yes, ma'am. So the next question is, what is the scope of gender identity counseling in a conservative culture?
In a conservative culture like India,
Yes, ma'am.
we are assuming that the scope is something that is very I know it's a job, I know it's a profession, so clearly that's where this question is coming from. But if you think that India does not have sufficient LGBTQ population, and where your scope is not going to be so much, then that's not true at all. That is again coming from a point of being not sufficiently informed. Scope is there. It just depends on why exactly you are in this field. Okay, the field of psychology, the field of mental health should never be chosen to see whether there is scope for you. Personally, I believe it's a helping profession should be chosen for the right reasons, because it can be quite stressful for you as a therapist. Scope may be there, but there are several other aspects that you need to think of as well. And any sort of helping profession should be done for the right reasons. So if you really want to be there and support them, do it right. And yeah, scope will happen if you are a good, approachable therapist and someone who can understand where people's problems comes from, and you're able to interact with them professionally and provide them with the right kind of guidance, then there's no reason why you won't have enough scope in it. So good luck.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. There are a few more questions here. So how can a layman help people who has gender identity issues?
Similar to what I was talking to you about, professionals, by building your knowledge, understand, read up. You don't want to do a course, that's all right. There's enough material available online right now which you can read up to increase your empathy, understand the narratives from their own lived experiences. So as a layperson, just by being empathetic and being kind and understanding and also being a bit supportive publicly, I think that will really go a long way in normalizing things for the LGBTQ population. So it's always knowledge is power. That's all you can do, and that's how you should do it. Just half-baked information is never right. So do it the right way, but to be kind and to be understanding, you don't need to really go through a course. Start by being kind, start by being approachable, start by being accepting, and make it known that there's nothing wrong. Kindness is a language that does not need to be taught in a college. It starts young.
Thank you, ma'am. I completely agree with your point here of being kind with everybody because we really don't know how the other person and what they're going through. So, ma'am, there's another question here. If someone has come out already but wants to resort to self harm and doesn't want anyone other than the therapist to know, what will the therapist be doing in such a situation?
This is for all clients. Whenever you start practice, whether you're working in a hospital setting, whether you're working in a private setting, whether you have your own clinical practice, it's very important for you to uh, make it known to your client that there are circumstances where confidentiality cannot be maintained, and those circumstances are when there is extreme distress leading to self harm, or there are symptoms of psychosis leading to self harm, or extreme psychosis where you identify that the person is going through and the person needs hospitalization, the person needs medical help. Those are the circumstances, or homicide, someone's tried to kill someone or has is harboring thoughts like that. It's important to keep family informed, or the law has to take its course there. So you need to understand your rights first before you enter the space. So if you're not equipped to handle suicide cases, or cases where people are contemplating self-harm, uh, or even if you are equipped to, you need to make it known, please. If you feel that that's there, and that is why supervised counseling is very important. At any time in life, you need to have another person who's worked, who's able to supervise you and guide you through the process. Never work alone, because it's going to be very tough for you to handle situations like this when that happens. But please, as a disclaimer, make sure that you help your client understand this even before you start a therapeutic relationship with them, irrespective of what problems your client is bringing, or who your client is going to be, or which group they belong to. Yeah, that's important. 3 times when confidentiality should not be maintained and cannot be maintained. I
Yes,
hope I've
ma'am.
answered the question. Okay.
Yes. So there is another question. Do you see CJ ever not being the norm anytime in the near future?
No, I didn't understand that. Deepti, can you repeat it?
Yes, ma'am. I'll just show it to you on the screen, ma'am. Is it visible for
Okay.
you?
Not yet. Let me see. Is het ever being the norm anytime in the norm? I don't know. We can hope for anything to become a norm, in a social setup, in a society. It starts young, it starts from a policy, it starts from several movements. Yeah, for anything, there needs to be, um, you know, fire for the smoke, isn't it? So unless we take the effort to make these initiatives, and there is a sort of a huge policy level change that happens, this becoming normal um, is going to be a while. But why not? I mean, if we are opening ourselves to understanding each other and doing the right things, then yes. But in the near future, I should hope so. But I don't know. Maybe I'm being too optimistic. But yeah, if we develop our understanding and knowledge from a very small stage, then yes, definitely.
Mm-hmm. So there's the next question, ma'am. How
Hmm.
do you help them deal with the negativity and the stereotype they are likely to face in the society?
By being supportive, if they're coming to you to deal with this negativity and the stereotyping, then, like I've mentioned in the slides as well, you have to first help them, express the anger that they feel because of the way they've been treated. Yeah. So, as a therapist, your role is explorative, and, help them identify what their problems are, which areas in their life is bothering them, what aspects are bothering them, how is it bothering them, help them understand those things, help them come up with positive ways in which they can deal with it without, probably putting themselves in trouble and things like that. So that's all you can do. All you can do is support them and guide them with the right sort of affirmative messages and cathartic relief. But that's, you teach them, right? I mean, you can work on their cognitive skills where they are able to handle it better. Are they reacting to these kind of stereotypes coming their way? Are they getting angry? Are they displacing their feelings onto their partner or to their family? What's going on? So explore those areas, help them understand that what they can actually change, they should change, and the things that they can't, then they should be able to handle it better, which is common in everything, in every aspect, not just with LGBTQ population, not just with stereotypes. Our stereotypes are very uh, common for everybody. We are dealing with different kinds of stereotypes. So, you're from Tamil Nadu, there is a stereotype. You're from Kerala, there's a stereotype. You're from Punjab, there is a stereotype. From Delhi, you're a stereotype. And then on top of all those things, if you also have, expressed gender identity being stereotyped as well, then that's going to be that much more difficult for you. So help them explore their thoughts and feelings and come up with solutions as to what best they can do. Any other
Thank you,
questions?
ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So there's another question. What do you think about the controversy surrounding gender dysphoria and failure of gender reassignment surgeries to help people be happy with themselves?
What do I think?
Yeah.
Um,
What?
Gender
What?
dysphoria and gender change, sex change, surgeries, are, I don't know, it's an unfair practice if you ask me. But you know everything that happens due to confusion, fear, lack of information, and not knowing what best needs to happen. So, when we don't have sufficient guidance, when we don't have someone telling us to let it be or let the child grow and figure it out, what do? We operate out of fear, isn't it? So, my opinion on this does not matter at all, honestly. I don't think I'm equipped to answer this question. But personally speaking, I think it's an unfair practice. But I also think it's important to look at it from the point of the parents who don't know any better. So I wish we are more informed about these things, the possibility of something like this happening. And, we learn to appreciate that little baby that's been given to us rather than try to make it um, look or feel perfect according to whatever norms we have in our head. It's not a doll or it's not a clay model, isn't it? It's a person with, it's a thinking, feeling being. Is it within our rights to do something to change it because we don't think it's perfect? I mean, I don't know. It's a thought to ponder about. Personally, I think it's difficult and tough. It's a tough decision. It's a difficult decision, but it
Mhm.
is not something that I can really comment about beyond it being unfair and how I feel it's sad both ways.
Mhm. Yes, ma'am. So I
Hmm.
came across the word rapid onset gender dysphoria.
Mhm.
Kindly throw some light on this, ma'am, for us.
Rapid onset gender dysphoria, gender dysphoria in itself, if you understand what that means, it's when children, yeah, teenagers especially, because that's when changes in their physical appearance starts happening, and people start understanding what is who they are in terms of when you're young, like when you're 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, you still you're common, you're a girl, you're a boy, but it doesn't really matter. I mean, you don't really understand your sexual differences or your bodily changes don't start appearing unless and until puberty hits. Okay, so when you're talking about rapid gender dysphoria that happening, so I believe sooner than later, it is not taking its gradual time like usually it does. It works around, it takes some time for teenagers to identify themselves to a certain gender type or whether they want to be non-conforming. So my understanding is purely this: it happens much faster. Again, I'm not equipped to handle any further information on this because it's not an area that I really work on. And if you are interested, you can reach out to me separately and I can give you a more detailed answer once I do some reading myself.
Yes, ma'am. We
it's
can
it's just
surely.
it's just I'm just being honest here. If there is anybody else who's equipped to answer that question in this group, please feel free to answer that question. This is my understanding, and that's how I put it.
Yes, ma'am. So there is a next question here, ma'am. Why isn't transgender pressure focused anywhere around the world, even though they are just as normal as the other people?
Why isn't transgender?
Pressure focused anywhere around the world, even though they are just normal people like anybody else.
Transgender pressure.
Yes,
What does
ma'am.
that mean? Who has asked that question? Can you ask them what exactly they mean by that? The pressure
Ma'am,
of
I
being a
just
transgender? Is that what they mean?
yeah, they're saying why is there no pressure? I don't know how to put it, ma'am. I'll just share the question with you. You can answer that person maybe.
Okay.
Can you see the question, ma'am?
It comes after a few seconds. Just hold
Yes, no problem, ma'am.
Ananya, there is a focus. There is an increased focus, in fact, now more than before, on, they are normal as other people. I'm glad you think that way. This is the whole idea of, you know, increasing knowledge in these areas, improving people's information and guiding them through this whole process. But, you know, is it not increasing around the world? I think it is, but it may not be as much as it is for you and me or for, the so-called uh, normal, stereotypical gender communities. Yeah, but I think there is a slight change that's happening across the world. Um, I would think so. I believe so, at least compared to how it was maybe 10, 15 years ago. But for it to become completely normal and completely okay, it's going to take some time, as any other uninformed, you know, aspects in life, any other areas that people are not completely aware of in their day-to-day work. And because it's not that commonly seen, right? People are coming out slowly now. People are beginning to make peace with this identity, beginning to make peace with how they feel. They're experiencing more acceptance. And as this goes on, if we continue this positive affirmation, then hopefully it will become the norm someday. Let's hope so.
Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am. So there's the final question here. What do you think about the 377 law?
Imprisoning people based on the sexual choices they make, I think, is unfair. It's as simple as that. You know, humanitarian rights, our right to express, right to believe, and right to companionship is common for everyone. I think a respectful culture should only encourage that. It's not fair to imprison anyone based on the choices that they make. I'm very clear about that. Since you asked me for my opinion, this is my opinion.
Thank you, ma'am. So that was the end of the question and answer session, ma'am. Thank you so much for such an insightful session. It was lovely listening from you about it. We learned about the terms related to the gender identity, such as sex, transgender, and also the different kinds of discrimination. We also understood some important points to consider in trans affirmative psychological practice, guidelines for mental health practitioners, and about counseling a teenager as well. So I request everybody to fill in the feedback form that will be uploaded on the chat box shortly. Please do fill that up so you receive your e-certificates in a day or two. Thank you so
Di-
much, ma'am.
Dipti, thank you
Over.
for the opportunity. I just wanted to also highlight the resources mentioned on the
Yes, ma'am. The
PPT that I
MC will be
shared. Can you
continuing.
just show that once?
Yes, ma'am.
So
Sure, ma'am.
resources, Inner Sight and Hamsafar and, Youth Care, as they can go into the links of these Dr. Safe Hands, which is in Chennai. Okay, these links are important, and in fact, I don't know how to share them across in the chat box, but maybe you should take a picture of this or something so that this is important resource for anyone who would like further information. I have touched upon a very, very small aspect of it. I am not fully equipped to even answer most of the questions that were asked. I'm sorry if you felt that maybe the answers were not what you were expecting, or if it was not appropriate, or forgive me if you felt that you know you were disappointed in anything that I expressed. Believe me, it was not intentional. However, I would like to guide you to the right sort of people who can help answer your questions. Feel free to reach out to them. And also remember, irrespective of, you know, where you practice and what you do, always remember the counseling principles. Be approachable, be accepting, maintain confidentiality, be understanding, practice genuineness, non-judgmental attitude, and unconditional positive regard, irrespective of who comes to you with what issue. Okay, that's our primary role as therapists, and that's one thing which I want all of us to always remember. Yeah, I thank M.O.P. Vaishnav for this opportunity, and Deepti, Pallavi, Gayatri, Nandini. Thank you very much. I wish you all to stay safe and stay happy. Good luck.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. I'm pretty sure all the participants here, audience here, will understand the counseling principles and they will follow it. So yes, ma'am. Now I'll request Ms. Vatsalam Rinalni, Assistant Professor, Department of Psychology, to render the oath of thanks. Over to you, ma'am.
Yes, hi, Pavitra. Thank you, Ms. Rohini Kesavan Rajiv, for sharing knowledge on the kinds of gender identity issues and the need to know on trans information and transformative. The guidelines to adhere were very indeed helpful, and certainly the listeners will inculcate the skills to be empathetic and non-judgmental towards gender identity disorder populations. Let me extend my gratitude in thanking our beloved principal, Dr. Lalita Balakrishnan, Vice Principal, Dr. Uttira, our head of the department, Ms. Gayatri Shweta Kumari, for the constant support and enabling the spread of knowledge come alive. My special thanks to the following colleges: University of Madras, Srimati Dev Kunmar Nanlal Bhatt Vaishnav College for Women, that is SDNB Vaishnav College for Women, Apollo Arts Science and College, Chettinad University, MSSW College, St. Thomas College of Arts and Science, Ethiraj College, Akal University, Chevalier Thomas Elizabeth College for Women, Dr. MGR Institute of Science and Technology, MES College of Arts, Science and Commerce, AM Jain College, Pondicherry University, Periyar University, Sharshan Jain College for Women, WCC, and the other members here. I also thank Ms. Ananya Warrior, first BSc Psychology, for bringing in the lineage of the speaker to the department. My special thanks to Ms. Nandini, former Assistant Professor, Department of Psychology, for her contribution towards the event. My gratitude to all faculties, club members, and students who have gathered here to make the event successful. My obliged thanks to Almighty for gracing the event successfully. As every end has a new beginning, I believe we all will be having few takeaways from the session, some food for thought, or some feedback to share. May the learning benefit forever towards the upliftment of the society, and best wishes to all who have gathered here. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Have a great evening.